looks like we have 86 attendees already online and more will be coming in. So I'd say we go ahead and get started right away. So first off, I want to welcome everyone to our very first kickoff event for Black History Month. My name is Larry Alade. I work for the Northeast Fisheries Science Center in Woods Hole, and I'm one of the co-chairs for Black History Month. Just a few basic mechanics for the meeting. To our audience, please note that your audio will be muted and video is turned off. Feel free to introduce yourself by using the chat function. I think it's a great way to connect with people as the event is going. You are welcome to ask questions at any point during the event through the Q&A function. We are saving questions at the end of the panel discussion if there's time. We have members of the facilitation team who are monitoring the chat and will be fielding questions. So before we get started with our program, I would like to turn over the mic to Dr. Robert Thieler, the director of the USGS Woods Hole Coastal and Marine Center and chair of the Woods Hole Diversity Initiative, who will be offering some brief remarks.
Hi, thanks, Larry. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Rob Thieler. I'm the Center Director of the U.S. Geological Survey's Coastal Marine Science Center here in Woods Hole and currently the chair of the Woods Hole Diversity Initiative. Welcome to the Woods Hole Scientific Community's 40th celebration of Black History Month. In 2004, the leaders of the 6 Woods Hole Science institutions, the Marine Biological Laboratory, NOAA Northeast Fisheries Science Center, Sea Education Association, USGS, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and the Woodwell Climate Research Center signed a memorandum committing our institutions to work together to attract and retain a more diverse workforce. That memorandum established the Woods Hole Scientific Community Diversity Initiative, which in turn established the Diversity Advisory Committee to support the institutions in their efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in and among the DI institutions, as well as the wider Woods Hole, Falmouth, Cape Cod, and Islands communities, and increasingly, due to moving things online during the pandemic, the nation and the world. On behalf of the Diversity Initiative, I'd like to thank our local virtual host, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the Woods Hole Diversity Advisory Committee, and especially the Advisory Committee's Black History Month Committee that Larry co-chaired for putting together another outstanding series of events through the course of the month. Thank you again for attending today. I'm pleased to turn things back over to Dr. Larry Alade to introduce today's program.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Thieler. So before we jump into today's program, I thought I'll share a few remarks regarding Woods Hole Black History Month. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Woods Hole Black History Month celebrations, and we could have not asked for a much better way to start the month by commemorating such a special event. While the theme for this year focuses on identity, representation, and diversity of the Black family, today we're going to slightly pivot our focus on a special panel discussion that explores the 40 years of Black History Month in the Woods Hole. And the title is The Journey and the Future. I want to extend my thanks to my co-chair, Angie Scott Price, and to the Black History Month Committee, as well as many friends of the Black History Month Committee who all did an incredible job delivering our programming this year, especially during this challenging time. In the face of ongoing struggles and challenges that many of us faced over the last 10 months, either from the pandemic, to civil unrest, to contentious elections, to the installation of a new administration, the Woods Hole Scientific Community more than ever recognizes the value of this event in building a stronger community through diversity. I would like to acknowledge the 6 research institutions, including the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the Marine Biological Laboratory, the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, the USGS Coastal and Marine Center, the Woodwell Climate Center, formerly known as the Woods Hole Research Center, and Sea Education, who all sponsor this program with annual contributions through the Woods Hole Diversity Advisory Committee. With that said, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel discussion, Dr. Ambrose Jearld, who started his career as one of the first Black fishery biologists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. He was a marine biologist at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center in Woods Hole for nearly 4 decades. During his career, Ambrose Jearld led an array of efforts to increase diversity in fisheries and related fields. To name a few, he was the first chair of the Woods Hole Diversity Advisory Committee to promote diversity across the 6 scientific institutions in Woods Hole. He was the founder of the Partnership Education Program and was director of the program for many years before he retired. In 2017, the Woods Hole Scientific Community launched an annual lectureship named in Dr. Jearld's honor. The lecture series named after after him reflects his career-long commitment to increasing diversity in environmental sciences and fisheries-related sciences. To many of us, Dr. Ambrose Jearld is an educator, a mentor, and a friend. And without further ado, I introduce our moderator for today's panel, Dr. Ambrose Jearld. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, and good afternoon to family, friends, and old colleagues or continuing colleagues, and to all who have joined us today for this special occasion, and that we've been now, as you've heard, been at for better than 40 years. As you can imagine, things start out informally and then become formal. And you will hear about that today. And I think in light of time, Larry, I thank you for that introduction, but I believe what I'm going to ask the panelists to do is in their own way, say who they are as we go through the event today, rather than my read their bios. Brad Brown, who is with us, Brad Brown recruited me to Woods Hole. I'll say that. Jarita Davis and I were colleagues while I was still there. Jarita is a poet and an author, in addition to what she does for the National Ocean Atmospheric Administration. Lionel Hall, who I think is joining us, had a long career at the Marine Biological Laboratory and chaired the Woods Hole Black History Month committee for 10 years or more. And we have expanded our presentations or presenters to Bergen, Norway. Margaret MQ, Mary McBride, is an old friend, colleague, and she is perhaps on this call today the person who is most responsible for initiating Black History Month celebration in Woods Hole. She's a scientist there, and she was a scientist when she was in Woods Hole. Found their way from Mobile through California to Brandeis to Woods Hole. So welcome panelists, and I would like to initiate the discussion here, more than a presentation style of panelists, and ask, starting out with what is the significance of Black History Month and why is it important? And of course, with that, how did we get started in Woods Hole? And Margaret, would you like to start out?
Well, I can do that. Thank you for inviting me. It's very nice to see you, Ambrose, Brad, again, and it's nice to meet, my fellow panelists. Well, it was a sign of the times, I think, Ambrose, because in the mid-1970s, there was a lot going on socially. Black Power movement was in effect, but the Negro History Week had started as early as 1926, and with the historian Carter Woodson trying to ameliorate the inadequate education that students were receiving about Black history. But then it became something else in the mid-1970s. President Ford formally acknowledged Black History Month, and it was also something that was initiated by the, what's it called? The Kent State University Black students had started the Black History Month celebration also. And so that was the time, I started there in 1975, and so that was the time when that was all happening. And I think that we felt a need not just because we were somewhat isolated, you know, being, I would say, fish out of water, pardon the pun. But we were struggling to some extent to achieve respect and recognition. And I think that a lot of the traditionally white scientists really questioned our presence there. So we decided that we wanted to celebrate Black History Month, and I think that it started out initially with the Harambe celebration, but rapidly extended to become a series of lectures meant to educate people in the Woods Hole community about the accomplishments that Black people had contributed to the marine sciences.
Yeah, I think, Margaret, what I recall too is as we moved from a very informal commemoration among ourselves in many ways, and friends that were not Black, that it was over at the Endeavor House, where the Woods Hole Exhibit Center now is, on School Street there.
Yes.
And we started out with the soul food potluck. And then I remember Linda Patanjo bringing her potluck soul food Polish dish, you know, and what have you. So yes, and then we obviously moved into then starting, you know, a more formal recognition when we were finding ways to bring the institutions themselves into the celebration. And that might be a good segue for Brad to offer something about what was going on from a more institutional perspective.
Well, thank you, Ambrose. Am I on? I'm unmuted now?
Yes.
No, we hear you.
Okay. No, the beginning of course, the federal approval of Black History Month came, as Margaret said, with the proclamation of President Ford. And so NOAA had actually, by 1980, actually had Washington event on Black History Month. So it was obviously something that in order to be effective in terms of the inclusion side of it, it had to be adopted officially and supported by the institutions. So we recognized initially in fisheries that this was a very important step that had come up from our employees, the people, our scientists who've been working there, and it should get support, and it did get support. And we were able to also realize, of course, that Black History Month is in Black history is not something just for those people who are of African descent. It is integral to understanding the history of the United States and the history of the world. And so the speakers and the programs that were put on were such that they were really, I think, changed the way that many people who attended had been brought up to look at history. I certainly got a very biased view of history in my high school history back in the 1950s. And this correction was an important part of what Black History Month still does. And so I was very happy to be supportive of an effort to have it become more formalized and have the backing of our director, Bob Edwards, and then later all of the other institutions that came on board as well.
Thank you, Brad. And you know what I would take privilege here to say also is that as we moved into more formalizing the program, we certainly were looking at the history of Blacks in Woods Hole. And of course, the person, you know, most foremost was Dr. Ernest Everett Just, who had spent many years there starting in the 20s. And of course, then we moved toward bringing in speakers. And so in about 1979 or 80, our first speaker or presenter on Black history, so to say, was Dr. Kenneth Manning, who is a professor and was a professor at MIT. And at the time, he was about 2 years out from publishing his book, Black Apollo of Science, about Ernest Everett Just life, and particularly as a scientist and in Woods Hole. And so he was our very first presenter. And then if we look at the records that we have now, which you can find online on the website, one of our first speakers also was Dr. Herman Branson, who's a physicist, was a physicist. He was president of Lincoln University, and a little anecdote, he worked with Linus Pauling in the early days in terms before the double helix came out. And he came in at that time to talk about ways that the scientific and technical laboratories could more effectively utilize Black college student resources. So that was tapping in also to what was going on in maybe more formalized ways of finding talent, of appreciating contributions and what others could offer to, so to say, the scientific endeavor. And I want to say before I forget also, we have later on in the month, Dr. Walter Massey is going to be interviewed by Mindy Todd. But Dr. Massey was our speaker in 1989, and while he was president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. And at that time, his talk was based on the question, Blacks in science, who needs them? And so I want to bring that in the sense that we're talking about Black history, you know, in a Catholic or universal sense, but we always had a focus on Blacks in science. And so we were wanting to bring, you know, expertise and intellect and thinking about how we needed to continue the social experiment of bringing those into science that had been left out before. So that's all part of it. And so you can imagine 40 years, and then we'll go and talk about certainly what this meant to the wider community at large and its part in galvanizing you know, the recognition of Black history. And I'd like to inject here for Dr. Davis and ask, you know, you came and then using and building on your background as a poet, as a writer, author, and I can recall you bringing in, and we at that time perhaps focusing a lot on poets and what poets could bring to the message about Black history and about moving forward. So would you like to chime in here and offer some perspective?
Sure, certainly. So I have a humanities background. I have a PhD in English literature and creative writing. And a lot of the people who I know, the scholars and academics, are in the humanities. So certainly poets, writers, wrote about their experiences. And I thought that would be add a little bit of maybe texture to some of the lectures that we are having. But in addition, there were historians and anthropologists and to give some kind of context to Black history. I maybe I hadn't been made aware that it was supposed to be specifically hard sciences, but I was thinking of Black History Month as a way to share some of Black history and culture with a community that has almost no exposure to it. Oh, should I introduce myself first? I realize that I haven't. So my name is Jarita Davis. I've worked at NOAA Fisheries for 15 years as a science editor. So that's how I ended up in the scientific community, even though I have this humanities background. And yeah, when I came on board and saw that there was a Black History Month, my first thought was, really? Because before I arrived in Woods Hole, I looked up the demographics and saw that there were fewer than 10 African Americans that were listed as living in Woods Hole. And when I brought this to Ambrose and to some other Black people who are living currently in the area, I thought they would be like, yeah, that's crazy small number. But instead they said, God, how did they get that many? 8? And they're trying to count on their fingers the 8 Black people they knew who could have been counted as living in Woods Hole. So, but the good thing about Black History Month is, and I think Brad Brown had mentioned this, and I'll echo this, is that, African Americans or people, Black people, however you want to identify yourself, we celebrate Black history all year round. 365 days a year, we're always celebrating Black History Month. So February isn't really so much for us as it is to share with everyone else some of the wonderful things that are part of being Black in America. And I think that I loved the lectures because it was more than just fun facts. I think a lot of places celebrate Black History Month by telling you a fun fact, like potato chips were invented by a Black man. Well, that's great, but this was a more in-depth, hour-long lecture, Q&A, and it really added to it. So yes, I knew a lot of folks who, like Dr. Courtney Baker, writes about images of violence throughout history, of American history against Blacks. So whether it's like lynchings or some of the terrible, difficult situations that are almost gory, and how it's sort of a fascination in American culture to have these Black bodies being mutilated. So there were talks like that that weren't scientific, but maybe more social, more cultural. And I thought that added another dimension, a little bit of depth. And I hope that people enjoyed it. Some folks after a talk would say to me, oh, I felt like I was back in college. That was really, thinking of a new perspective and thinking about, I don't know, how slavery came to Brazil and how they actually changed the definition of race in order to maintain slavery in Brazil. So that's nothing to do with science specifically, but it definitely, there were conversation starters and people were thinking about the experience of being Black in America.
Thank you,
Sure.
Jarita. And I think that leads us to maybe swing back as we then eventually move into the Harambe, but about the impact, and not just impact, but how the wider community helped bring impact. And so Margaret, Brad, Jarita, whomever, step in here and help us see what was going on, because my thinking is, we recall that when we got this going, we immediately connected with, but actually what was going on to some degree in the public school with some of the Black teachers there and administrators and the NAACP and what was going on Cape Cod, at the Upper Cape, for example, trying to get Black teachers up there. So there's so much connected to how this was a galvanizing event. I, for example, came to Cape Cod with no knowledge other than I had been in college with one person that I knew was of Cape Verdean descent, but really hadn't focused on Cape Verde. And even though I looked at the history of what was going on, moving from colonialization to independence in Cape Verde was one of those places. But here, looking at the Black diaspora or the African diaspora, I mean, how this thing was so galvanizing for the local Cape Verdean community, as well as all other persons here, whether it was from the Caribbean, starting in my household, to Africa, or here across the states, or Brazil, wherever. So let's talk about the wider community and how the impacts that we've had in looking at Black history, and hopefully what it's done to help Woods Hole scientific community become a better and more welcoming community.
Well, I'll give a crack at that, Ambrose. How do I do to get unmuted here? You want to unmute me?
No, you're good, Brad. Go ahead.
We can hear you.
Okay. Yes, it very much was interesting to look at what was happening in the wider community, and particularly, obviously, the largest number of people of African descent in the area were people who had come from the Cape Verde Islands. But when they had come from the Cape Verde Islands, it was a Portuguese colony. So they came into this country being stamped as Portuguese. But in 1975, Cape Verde became independent and joined the African Union, of course, as an African country. So all of a sudden, their home country changed from a Portuguese country to an African country. And in addition, they in one sense, they had whereas most African Americans, when they had looked earlier in the 60s, when the other countries in Africa, other than the Portuguese colonies, had become independent, there was a generic connection, but not a personal one. But in the revolution in the 70s, the leading African independence fighter was Cabral, who I think probably half of the Cape Verdeans in Falmouth could claim as some kind of a relative. And so when he spoke at the United Nations, there was a resurgence of a different sort of pride in that community. And that dovetailed with the opportunity that the Harambe particularly provided itself for people of Cape Verdean ancestry to bring their culture mixing with the larger, broader African-American cultures that had come into the scientific community and been a smaller presence, of course, on Cape Cod all the way back to the 1600s. So I think, and the NAACP, which got started in the Cape on the early 1960s, had really began to expand at looking at Cape situations by 1970s, whereas in the early years, their major focus was in getting the civil rights bills passed that ended segregation in the South. So they had started a real effort to get with the local school system to get them to recruit Black teachers. My wife at that time worked in Barnstable Middle School in Hyannis and started a Black History Month effort there. Let me get this foolish phone out of the way.
Okay, and
And
okay.
so just, but I can't help but mention the NAACP's work with Bourne, the Upper Cape Vogue, because Ambrose mentioned it. That hit the Boston newspapers through the NAACP when they published a yearbook that used the term porch monkeys in it. And that opened up a whole can of worms in terms of opening up the opportunities for people to truly participate in throughout the Upper Cape Vogue region in the offerings of that school had to offer. And so that changes were being made. So there was a spirit of change on the Cape in the area that the Black History Month provided a focal point and a guidance point and a rallying point for the wider community.
Thank you, Brad. And I see what I would like to is picking up on the Harambe, Lionel Hall. Lionel, as I said, has a long history there at the Marine Biological Laboratory as far as his place of employment, but was very instrumental and key in, again, galvanizing this wider community. And so, Lionel, when we think about the Harambe, in addition to, it was an opportunity to bring the family together, and the families look forward to it, given the time of day. It was purposely offered at that time of day. So it wasn't just for the Woods Hole people who could fit it in during their day and go back to their labs or to their offices or whatever.
Right.
But it was set up so that we could now bring in the wider community, and they came in with all those dishes. But then we had all those storytellers for the children, and we had the musicians, the persons of all parts of the arts. But so from your point of view, tell us a bit about the Harambe and putting the Harambe on.
Well, thank you and welcome and hello. I'm glad I finally caught up to you guys. Yeah, I guess the Harambe and all of the functions and all of the community outreach did hit home for me, or it was the perfect storm for me. So working at NBL, I'm not a scientist. I was an administrator, so to speak. But basically, to be a part of the program, to learn about the scientific impact and the speakers in the past history of the program. So I basically got in on the perfect wave. The program had been running for years without me, and I just happened to have the opportunity to come in and be a member of that. But the Harambe was a big special part for me because I believe, Ambrose, I started off when I was just a wee member on the committee, or a new member of the committee. You used to send me out to go get pots and stuffed dishes that people would prepare.
Oh yeah,
so that was part of my Harambe Day and Black History Month. So I would be running around Falmouth, Onset, Bobby Oden to get the ribs and things like that. So that endeared us. Bobby never came, and God rest his soul, he passed away on us. But those were the things that
Napoleon,
and Reuben Davis, who
thinking of the ribs.
Yeah, Reuben with the ribs, right? So they always had an ongoing competition, those guys. But I liked Bobby's. But no, the functions and the outreach to the community that was already, like I said, had already begun. But it gave me a chance to reach out to other folks and, younger folks. I thought my thing was that, I would see a lot of parents there of people, of friends of mine. And I said, my parents are here, but where's your son? Where's your niece? Where's your daughter? So it was a good push that I tried then. Once again, it just, when you say the bigger outreach in the community. So you had George Spivey and us, all with the Concerned Black Men, which I think sprang from, the NAACP, just all of those organizations being there, or the nucleus of us being participants in that stuff. was just great. And Woods Hole was a place that people didn't feel like they, wow, there's blacks in Woods Hole, you know, as Jarita was mentioning, you know, or there are blacks on Cape Cod, at least, you know. I mean, I was in the military and I would meet people and they go like, so where are you from? I said, well, Cape Cod. And they go like, well, give me the nearest city. I said, well, Boston. Oh, we know where you are now, but Cape Cod and blacks didn't, you know, relate to them. They were going, I don't know anybody down on the Cape. So it was kind of interesting. But the Harambe was a special time. I enjoyed it. The entertainers, the speakers, the day, you know, that we'd have in the Miggs room, and then going into the cafeteria and things like that. Just reaching all the people, black, white, red, yellow, scientists, non-scientists, the community, the Cape Verdean community that you know, I'm still wondering sometimes whether they feel they're black or white or in between, but we're all one. And it was a great opportunity for them to bring their dishes, to have fun, to understand what Black History Month was really about, because I was just amazed at how many of my friends and some of their families just didn't participate in what I felt was the only program on the Cape Cod, which is the Woods Hole Black History Month program.
Yeah, thank you, Lionel. And I just like to add, you know, back in the day and when we got started and on into it to the middle, I think about, we had a strong Black middle class here, persons who had worked at the highest levels that this country has to offer, had retired or had homes here. I remember the Godmothers organization of Black women, the Doers, an organization of Black men. And I remember I'm trying to call the group out of Martha's Vineyard. I mean, the folks from Martha's Vineyard, from the school system, were very supportive. They came every year, they presented. From Barnstable, you had John Reed and the teachers and families out of there. And then, you know, Bird Williams up out of, and Rose Merritt out of Bourne. So you had that kind of mixture going on. And yet we were bringing people to come in and talk about Black history and how to diversify the science enterprise. And so while there were times that we thought, wow, we have all of this interest and participation from folks far and wide, we still somehow try to keep, well, how do you get the folks in Woods Hole to come out of their laboratories or out of their buildings to participate in this? Now, that's not to suggest that there weren't some, because there were. And the thing about the celebration itself, it became a very diverse group of people dedicated. I think of Phil and Nan Logan, for example, and of Steve Clark and so many who gave of their time and efforts and from the heart, you know, that really made it a galvanizing event. But I also want to inject here too, so we not forget, or at least it's my opinion and perspective, as far as I know, the Woods Hole Black History Month activities, when they became formalized, it was the first such endeavor to bring the Woods Hole scientific institutions together on anything. And so I may be corrected on that, but I believe that's the case. If I look at what is going on if I look at what's going on in today with our diversity, equity, and inclusion and welcoming efforts. We have, if you've heard here, the diversity initiative made up of the 6 institutions and the heads of those institutions. And the chair of that committee introduced the session today. This is all out of this recognition of Black History Month and what we need to do in whatever way we can to bring awareness, respect, and presence to wherever we are in these United States and its territories. And so I think that, you know, if history is kind to us, it cannot overlook that, that what I believe that together we have done for this community, and we're still there, still trying to be part of the community, still trying to get in persons who come to help lead these institutions as well, to lead us into the light, so to say. Now, I don't want to get on start preaching here a soapbox, but here again, I want to go back to Margaret, everyone, Jarita, the panel here. In terms of the programming, in your minds, you know, what kinds of things were we trying to do or wrestling with in terms of, you know, I recall, for example, we relied on as far as the theme of the month, we relied on the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and from the wider perspective of what to focus on. But yet we were constrained by the institution saying, well, if we put up our money, you got to bring us people to come in here and talk about science or present their science. So we had those kind of balances to attend with. Anyone want to chime in here? Don't be bashful.
Rita?
Yeah, I'll speak.
Alade, you're here. Yeah, join us. You're
Apps. I'll let Rita go, and I can certainly follow up.
Oh, sure. So again, I hadn't realized all of those pressures from the scientific institutions asking for more science. I was thinking of it as, you know, we are here, and people don't always see us in this community. And while I have a lot of really great, like one-on-one relationships with many people in the Woods Hole area, Falmouth area, Cape Cod in general, what a lot of folks don't always understand is that when a community is so homogeneous for so long, that's by design, right? That's not just by accident. So if we want to create the diversity that we talk about, if we want to increase the pool of knowledge that we're reaching from, and not just have it be the same kinds of scientists that we see over and over again, that also has to be by design. And so I thought that sort of a cultural understanding of some of the implications of what folks think, like, oh, well, there just aren't enough Black scientists out there to hire. Well, that's simply not true. Those of us who are Black, who are in this field, we all know that there are Black scientists who could be hired. So, I mean, it has a real impact on whether or not our community can be diversified. I know there are people who have come and left, who have come and stayed for maybe 5 years, and then they just said, you know what, this is just too hard. This is just too emotionally trying and stressful. They've gotten pushback at work. I was on the library board at the Woods Hole Library, and someone's wife asked me, what brought you here to a concert they were having? And I was like, I'm on the board. And she was like, yeah, but what brought you here? Like, this sense of, you don't really belong here. And so I felt like that side needed to also be part of the discussion, in addition to highlighting the good science that African Americans have been doing for years. But maybe, I don't know how useful or how much of an impact that made, but at least people were thinking about these issues and the effect that they have on human beings. Because at the end of the day, the scientists, they bring their families here. You bring your family here, and you know, your son is like, I don't know, pulled over for no reason, or, you know, suspected of shoplifting because they just are not used to seeing Black folks in the shop. Folks aren't going to want to live here, right? So I feel like that aspect of the community, the culture, is unsuspectingly, I don't think anyone intentionally is picking out and saying, oh, you Black girl on the library board, why do you exist in my community? Like, it was genuine curiosity. She couldn't believe that I was there, but not realizing how much of an impact that has on someone. And I just stay out of stubbornness. And then also, I really do. And also so that when new folks do come, like, I was really heartbroken when some of these, I'm thinking of some Black women specifically, I can think of 3 who came, had jobs, were in scientific fields, really were, you know, invested in doing well here, and then eventually just had to leave. So I'm here for the next one to try to convince them to stay, and so that they have someone to call and say, should I be worried that, you know, I don't know, that an election just happened and should I stay home for a week? They're like, no, I think we're okay in Woods Hole. So that's the kind of thing you need to know that what a community is. So, all right, sorry, someone else, Larry, you were going to say.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Davis. That is extremely right on, message from my point of view.
Yeah, I think I'll add too, because when we're thinking about programming and as chair of the Black History Month committee, one of the things that, we often think about is going back to the original question, the significance of Black History Month. And so while we're doing it and not necessarily trying to fit within the pressures that, that's being presented, to the committee itself. Wanted to speculate and maybe build up a little bit from what's been said earlier. And I think there's a lot of great points, and I really enjoyed the history that Margaret really lined out about, how Black History Month came about, where it started with the Negro Week by Carter Woodson. One of the things that I read, and I was just surfing, was Carter Woodson, he stated, if race has no history,
Oh, you're freezing.
if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes, oh, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
You're choppy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. How's the audio and the video right now? I can shut my
Yeah,
video
yeah.
off. Is that causing problems?
Now you're
Okay.
good.
Okay, excellent. So I want to pick up from a quote that I picked up from Carter G. Woodson, who stated, if a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world. And, when I really think about that quote, what it really tells me, or what I take away from that there's no amount of legislation that one can grab one's equality if a society does not really value who you are or where you came from. So, not to say that policy or legislation is not important. I mean, Martin Luther King stated that, law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. Yes, that may be true. But while we've looked back over the last 10 to 11 months, we've seen how this has played out in the civil unrest throughout the whole nation and worldwide. So when we're thinking about Black History Month in terms of the programming, I really think about, going back to its purpose and trying to align it, of course, to the national theme. We try to be not prescriptive when we're designing our programs, but more so to really educate and to recognize what Brad said earlier, that this is American history. It's just not just Black history only we're sharing, as Jarita alluded to. So in my opinion, and going back to the significance and importance of Black History Month in terms of our, designing of the program, I think it's not only, it's designed to educate, about the struggles, the contributions, and the achievements of African Americans, but I think it's also designed for us to be able to face the harsh truth if we want to really make a difference, if we want to make a change. I also think it's intended to break down, the divide in nationality and teach universal love without distinct race, merit, or rank. And I think, in my opinion, to achieve those, we have to respect the dignity of one another to ensure equality for one another. So I think that when we look at what the values and the significance is, I think that, it resonates in how we design our program and the type of program we want to, put out to the community at large.
Yeah, and thank you, Dr. Alade. And we will go on. And I just want to point out that we have about 8 more minutes. And I want to make sure that if there's anyone who had something they wanted to get in, that we keep the time in mind. And I would just say that, thinking again about who we are, where we've come from, and what we hope for Black History Month in the future. I think about some all of it is just, a good thing. But there's one thing that sticks out in my mind too about this event, and it was Mr. Phil Barboza. When he brought in that 30-some piece band into the cafeteria at the Swope Center. And he had performed before that a couple of times with smaller groups or whatever. And when he connected that to Count Basie and to Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald, you name it, I said, all right, I finally arrived on Cape Cod. Because when I got here, I said, I didn't know how far up south was until I got here. But when I heard Phil Barboza and that 30-some piece band, I said, orchestra, I said, Lord, have mercy. And so that's one thing I want to make sure I get in. And then when Mother Bear came in from Mashpee, from the Wampanoags, and connected the history of Black America, African American, Native American, and the impact that made on me, everything that I'd ever learned or would come to learn about Black history and here on Cape Cod, that sticks out in my mind. So, and then certainly there's so much more, but the way we connected and are connecting the families here from all ethnic and sectors is tremendous from my point of view.
Let me amen that, Ambrose, because as you mentioned, the galvanizing effect that the Black History Month activities and celebration have generated, it's something that it contributes to the sensitivity and the social tolerance that we so deeply need in this country now, because like it or not, and some don't like it, the United States is becoming more diverse, multi-ethnic, and multicultural. And we're all here together. We're all in the same boat. And so when the storm is raging, as we can clearly see in the recent events, and the waters are turbulent. So we can either row the boat together and keep it afloat, or we can all go down with the ship. But I was very taken by Amanda Gorman's speech at the
inauguration.
Yeah, at the inauguration. And one line stuck out tremendously to me. And she says that we've seen a force that would rather shatter our nation than share it. And that is something that the Black History Month celebration has helped to remedy, in terms of, I think that the understanding and appreciation for the diversity between us or among us is a key, to being able to strengthen our communities and work together. So that means that Black History Month is something that is valuable, and I would encourage any culture to try to celebrate itself, in the same way.
Thank you.
Ambrose?
Yes, Brent, go on.
When I want to like to say something, I think that how important it is and how important it is for the administrations of the institutions to support it. Back in October, there was a news item that went out by Associated Press, and it said, racist graffiti found at Cape Cod's Lowell Holly Reservation in Mashpee. There were 24 racist messages, including Trump 2020, bring back slavery, whites only, Cape Cod KKK has over 10,000 members. There is no one in any other background that we people who are leaders and administrators who bring and hire to come to work on Cape Cod that has to consider that they can take a pleasant walk in a state reservation and enjoy the natural beauty of the area and run into something like this. And that's why it is so important that when something like this comes up, that all of the institutions continue to support it and build it and reach out so that it reaches an ever widening wave, like ripples from a puddle thrown in the water, including not just those of African descent, but all of those who live there and share this space of Cape Cod.
Thank you, Brad. And at this time, we have about a minute. I'm going to turn it back over to the Woods Hole chair, Dr. Alade.
Thank you, Ambrose. And thank you everyone for such a live discussion. And unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we wish we could have taken some questions, but I think there's been some really great lively discussion today, and perhaps maybe an opportunity we can follow up, maybe through our website. First of all, I want to thank our moderator, Dr. Ambrose, did a fantastic job. And I also want to thank our panelists today who participated in today's discussion. I just want to briefly highlight that we got some more programming coming through the month of February. Next week, we have an interview with Dr. Massey with Mindy Todd. You do not want to miss that interview. It's going to be an amazing interview based on his recent memoir, In the Eye of the Storm. February 17th, we have an all-women panel discussion on the work of a Boston columnist, Janae Osterhold, on the beautiful resistance. And we also from the Ernest Just Foundation, so stay tuned, details to be determined. And finally, I wanted to also bring to everyone's attention that, while we can't do the in-person Harambe this year, we actually, the committee came up with the idea to do a virtual Harambe. And so this is going to be a month-long event. Visit our website, the Woods Hole Black History Month, and there you will find a number of recipes that you can take on and try out. And also we ask you or welcome you to share some recipes as well. So other than that, I want to thank everyone. I think this has been a fantastic discussion, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry,
Yes.
do you have the recipe for my sweet potato pie?
Oh, we'll get it on there.
No, I provided it a long time ago.